Well, I'm delighted to, I know many of you, some of you I don't, I hope to meet you. I'm glad I'm glad, I'm not used to talking. I'm glad John's back there. Thank you. Actually, I know the ones of you I know that there may be a part of my history you don't know, and that is before I went to the School of Architecture and studied architecture, I was not in Vietnam, fortunately. I was teaching school in North Carolina for 4 years. So I have 4 years of teaching 7th and 8th graders. So I'm going to approach this much as I would teaching. It goes way back, but I've still retained a lot of that thinking about school. First off, I grew up in the Baptist church and Episcopal church in my history. And have you ever seen a more beautiful setting than looking at the sky? These trees we had more trees. The trees were blooming, or you'd see leaves, framed by the glass and this incredible piece of it's big enough to be called architecture, but they are. And there'll be more discussions by others about the art. But I'm going to mention it, and you can certainly see how important what the importance it plays in the architecture of the building. And there's some really interesting history about that. And like Jill said, Barbara Friedman. Actually, I've been talking to Barbara over the last few days. She's been a great resource, and there's a wonderful and lengthy piece of the history of the temple that I'm going to refer a couple of things to as well that Barbara wrote, because Barbara's a past president of the congregation as well as John. Just a couple of quick notes. She said 1809 is the first known Jewish occupant of Raleigh, a merchant. Mr. Mordecai, interesting name that we'd all recognize from the Mordecai area and Mordecai Street. The temple slowly grew, and I won't go into the details on that, but Barbara tells a good story. But in 1922, it was a large enough group of people that they felt that they needed their own home, and they built a temple. It was on Hillsborough Street, right next to the Char Grill. It's not there anymore. The cornerstone is right out here as you walk in the door, however. Which brings us to a developer story, because we sold this. The congregation sold the old temple, and there's a picture of it, by the way. Let me take you to the first page. That is a picture of the old temple that was on Hillsborough Street, right next to the Char Grill, to give you a point of reference. Well, I demolished it. We don't need to go there, Jill. No, the congregation sold the building, moved out here, and then, I don't know, 10 or 15 years later, the successor small congregation didn't want to keep it for an urban church, and it was put for sale.
And you did get the blessing of the congregational leaders before they were demolished.
Requiring only that I bring the cornerstone from the old building I did, which is still out here. So anyway, and just one last little anecdote. Jill and I were just members starting, and Leslie, I know John, were coming to services. And as you know, we have a holiday service on Yom Kippur, this fasting. And let me just leave this thought with you. We're fasting, and next door we're hearing orders we're smelling the smoke from the Char Grill and hearing the orders of whatever people are ordering. So that's just a little piece of history. So anyway, the temple, there was an effort to build a new temple in late 60s. The decision was made to try to raise money, have no mortgage. That was not really successful. But then an effort was mounted in about 75 to build a new building and to spend enough money and raise capital, and also take on debt if we had to build the right kind of facility. And that's what really got it going, and that's what this building resulted from. It began in 1975. Michael Landau was hired as the architect. We did not have this ark at the time. We knew, like a lot of temples, the focal point of the worship service should be the ark, where the Torah scrolls are, and you'll see those later. But this is a really important story. During the design, but before construction, I believe I'm saying this correctly, Dr. Abraham Kanoff, who you may know, made his daughter, he was instrumental in creating the Judaica Museum portion at the Museum of Art. And he somehow had a connection or knew of a congregation up in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, right outside Detroit, that was moving to a new temple, not unlike what we did. They had a very historic ark, 1857. This was built in 1857. And they offered it to anybody who would come get it. No, free, you just had to come get it and transport it. And Albert Levine and Leah Levine were real cornerstone members of the community at the time, of the congregation at the time and back in the past. And they took Michael, they went to Michael Landau, they went up to see this ark, and on the spot decided that they would take it. And Albert owned Heilig Levine Furniture Company, so they send a Heilig Levine truck up there. They bring the ark back to Raleigh. As the building was being designed, so it had to be stored for quite a while. So they stored it, and as you see, what it is. And if you notice coming in, and there's a picture. In fact, let me refer you to the back of the book. There's a color photograph of the temple, very early in its construction, called Temple Beth Or in its initial form. It's a horizontal large picture. And you can see, if you didn't notice it as you drove in or walked in, the ark plays a prominent part in the front elevation, just as it does in the worship service that goes on inside the building. You very much see the backside, and of course the shapes are there as well. So it was obviously a point. So just to bring you forward a little bit, so I connected with Michael within the last month or so when we knew this program was going to happen, and asked him if he could share any papers, files, whatever. And he also, and just anecdotally, he connected me with another architect named Turan Duda. Turan was a classmate of mine at NC State. He was a little behind Michael. Turan was actually the draftsman. He did all the drawings for Michael on the entire building. Turan now is an internationally significant architect. He's got a large office in Durham. He's done buildings all over the world. But Michael and Turan and I had a wonderful conference call about 2 or 3 weeks ago and just talked about a lot of how all this unfolded. And at the time, Turan was just an apprentice, but Michael was the architect. So it was a wonderful connection. And there's several pages starting about the third page. I've noted them as their original studies by Michael Landau. He did a couple of large poster boards, and I couldn't get them any differently than this. I couldn't break them up. But these are some study images that he used with the congregation, I guess the design committee that was working on the building. And on the input side, down in the middle and the bottom, you do see an ark that is our ark. But you do see there were other arks that they were thinking about what might be used. We would build a new ark. And if you've ever been in a lot of more contemporary temples or synagogues, you'll see sometimes a very contemporary interpretation of the same kind of place to store the Torah scrolls. And another thing, and there are a lot of images here. Michael it was very important to Michael, and you can see it in this building. He wanted to evoke the image of a lot of the old wooden Polish synagogues, and there are pictures of them, some that he gave me that immediately follow, and there's a picture of the ark in there as well, which I've already talked about. But there are a number of images of these synagogues, and there's actually a colored page of some, many of which are now demolished. But that was the important image that he wanted to evoke. And in fact, bringing the wood inside the building. Now, wood outside would have made no sense in 1975. We're past the point of building an exterior wooden building. But a lot of the wooden, you see the wooden ceiling, this wooden ceiling rising, and yet another level rising even above it. So not only was the wood, but sort of the height and the loftiness of that were very important to it. And I think Leslie was reminding me that there was a lot of discussion. Michael wanted to leave it absolutely natural. It's pine, but it's been stained, or it's lovely. It is what it is. So obviously, these are older, very ancient buildings, many of which don't exist anymore. They were destroyed, obviously, in Eastern Europe with the Nazis and other things. But you can see a lot of the design elements of some of these I've shown you that I've attached. And these are just images, some of which he had and some of which I found, that were a real organizing force around the aesthetic of the building, not how it functioned as a religious facility. So the building was then built, and it was opened in 1978. 1978, we had our first service, and we occupied it. Barbara tells me that the first high holiday service, which would have been sometime in the fall of the following year, several of the major leaders of the congregation immediately realized it wasn't big enough. We didn't have enough space. We didn't have nearly the amount of land that we have today. And let me have you go to the last page, which might help this little conversation. That's a Google Earth shot from yesterday, and you can see the original temple in red. That's what was built and what was finished in 1978. We with the generous support of other congregation members and acquiring land, we acquired more land to the west as far as we could go till we got up near the shopping center up here. And we've subsequently added two wings. One was certainly, historically I was involved in this. We thought one of the plans was we were going to do an open classroom. Well, that's an old idea that sort of went by the wayside a long time ago. We were going to have an open classroom in some of these back spaces around the sanctuary and some other places in the building. Immediately, the noise and the chaos was unsustainable. So very quickly, we put in these glass partitions. And in fact, I did it with my company, the glass, to separate it out and give us more privacy as well. But that was only a Band-Aid solution. So we quickly realized we needed to add a religious school wing, and that's the wing that goes right off to the right here. And y'all may go through that today. And that was finished in 85. So we moved in 78. We realized we needed more space. Some congregational leaders acquired some additional land, and we also were able to then push to that direction. And then later in 1999, we couldn't hold our major holiday services in this facility. As lovely as this is, we needed a larger space for gathering of the congregation. So we built a large social hall out the back, which you can also see, with a lot more religious school. And in fact, this section now was originally expanded to be the religious school. Is a lot more administrative, and a lot more of the educational functions are in this new wing. Very functional, very boxy, nothing at all like what's here, but they really needed to be. We needed the space, and we couldn't add more space like this. So we retained this ceremonial space, and it is exactly the way it was built. But those serve us very well, and those were added. So the second one was added in 99, and that was the religious school and a larger social hall. In fact, our large high holiday gatherings are held in that new facility. It's large, square, big ceilings, lots of room. Nothing like this, but that was there. So, is there anything else I want to teach you eighth graders here? So, Jill, is there anything you'd like me to add? I sort of ran through my initial ideas.
Well, I can't think of anything. Leslie might, having been on all those committees. Do y'all have any questions?
Yeah,
I have a question.
sure.
I'm just fascinated by the concept of moving that piece. Does any part of that come apart? Is the glass removed?
It is removable.
It came in pieces.
It came in pieces. Yeah, that would be incredible, wouldn't it? 1857 is when it's built. I went back and found the history of that. That was a temple that was moved to an entirely new building. So that was sort of what happened when we moved from downtown out here. The Ark was and it has been restored. The doors, and the rabbi will show you.
Is it locked?
I don't know.
Well, the rabbi's going to do that.
I'll let her do that.
Okay, well, this was just put in, what, 5 years ago? 6 years? Not long. The original doors were not working well.
Yep.
This was donated by one of our members, and the whole thing is rebuilt.
So, how about any more questions? I mean, you're going to see it around the building, but this is obviously the most significant part. And it's been delightful to be a part of this. And
I do have one thought I had about this is that Roland has mentioned the high holidays, which are such wonderful services because they're daytime services. Our normal services are on Friday night and it's dark. And you can imagine what a different experience it is to be in this room in the dark. So people like my brother who sits in that seat every Friday night get to see this place in the dark most of the time. But one of the beautiful things about the high holidays is that there's just all this light.
And it's usually in the fall, too.
And
It's a
we're-
pretty time of
Jewish
year.
people are all about light, so it's wonderful to have the light days when we have those celebrations, and it's great to be here today. I just love to look out the window.
Okay. Any other questions or whatever? I'm not gonna stay through the entire program, but I'll be here just a little. Anyway, all right.